This is the Left Forum. We come every year because the people who come to this event every year are caring and knowledgeable, and many of the forums are extremely educational.
And we get to meet people like you.
As well as often seeing our friends who've come on their own.
Right.
Because
where we can all meet.
We all have commonality. And that's what it's all about. Commonality and justice.
I am Jean Shaw. I'm an artist, I'm an activist, and an educator. And I fight against nuclear energy, I fight against gas pipelines, I fight against things that are bad for the earth from beginning to end. And one of those things is agriculture. And obviously I don't fight against agriculture per se, we wouldn't live without it. But the way we practice agriculture is petrochemical heavy. So we're still using fossil fuels processed to make bad fertilizers and bad pesticides and bad herbicides and other bad chemicals so that we can raise unhealthy crops over wider expanses of the land that use more and more water that we can't afford in order to feed more and more animals that we can't afford, who are being tortured, being fed stuff they never should be eating in the first place, so that we can in turn eat them. Everyone could be vegan for one day a week. Think of the difference it would make. I'm not gonna think, okay, you're gonna be going to hell if you don't just turn vegan right this minute. Fine, I'm not asking that. I'm asking for everyone to do it one day a week. And then try 2 days in a row. And before you know it, there's all these things that you don't eat and you're not going to miss it. And it really can happen. You don't need sugar, you don't need wheat, you don't need meat, and you don't need dairy. You don't need those things. The workers who work in all of the food plants, whether they're processing meat in awful conditions, and many people already know that it's awful conditions for the animals, and that is unconscionable. But what we forget is it's also horrible conditions for the often undocumented workers. And the reason that the employers want the undocumented workers, they want the immigrants to come in because they're not paying them. And everyone says, well, they take the jobs that Americans don't want. Well, because Americans don't have to work below minimum wage and without proper security and proper protections. Those workers have nowhere to turn. They are exploited from the minute they wake up in the morning until the minute they go to bed in the morning. So it's really bad. And also that we can have cheaper prices on the really bad, unhealthy food that we eat. And now they also want to take away the labeling of the food. So fight it. This is your food. This is your life. We can't live without food, and we can't live without water. And these practices waste water, destroy the water that's there. And these are the same farms that want to allow themselves to rent a little plot over in the corner over there for some fracking pads. Because what the heck? Got to make some more money. Meanwhile, their animals have to still drink the water, and we are still being sold those animals to eat. And by we, I mean we as a society at all times. I never mean we like you and me personally, because that doesn't count. All of us together are we. Animal agriculture creates vast quantities of methane, and it's every bit as bad as fossil fuels. And fossil fuel production releases tons. Natural gas is methane. But before you ever burn that and create carbon dioxide, it's methane. So if you don't burn it, it's already worse than carbon dioxide even before you burn it. And coal is the same. It's just dirtier and sootier, but it's got all that methane, and very often both of those commodities are radioactive. Cows have to belch and poop, and they have to digest their food. If cows weren't overpopulated in the world because everybody wants to eat their steak, then we wouldn't have vast fields of cows all over the world at this point, and it wouldn't be so bad. But also, the fact that we're feeding them all this GMO material that we're growing so that we can fatten them up faster and make them sick, so we have to give them antibiotics. They weren't meant to eat corn and soy, they're meant to eat grass. And it's not just, oh, it should be grass-fed so it'll taste better and healthier for you. It's better for the planet and it's better for the cows. Not that anyone cares what's good for the cows, but tough, I do. And it's just really bad. And they need to stop being overproduced. We need to stop doing all this out of balance farming that we're doing. And I don't blame the farmers. They are given no choice. They're caught between a rock and a hard place. But what happens is the rot and the sickness all goes towards adding more greenhouse gases to the world. And it's on and on, spiraling down, down, down. We're just flushing ourselves right down the toilet with our practices, and we need to change. Concerning peace and animals, for one thing, when you have torture and cruelty to animals, that is bad enough all by itself. It's unacceptable. But what a lot of people don't realize is that is the gateway to torture and cruelty of humans. And it's hierarchical. We have to stop hierarchical thinking. Do you have to believe that humans are better than animals? Because what does that mean for the humans that you decide you don't like? If it's okay to treat animals that badly, all you have to do is do what Hitler did. Oh, they're subhumans, so we can torture them. Oh, we can have slaves, they're not really humans. We can take that land, they're not really human. We can wipe them out, they're not really human, and we don't need them. It's all connected. It has to stop. And they killed the buffalo for no reason other than to kill the Indians. The so-called Indians, I totally reject the term Indians, but I also totally reject the term Native American. So you starve them and destroy their culture so they could take over all those fields and do what they're now doing. And they destroyed lots and lots of crops so they could grow the non-native crops that need more stuff that wasn't available here, so they had to do more bad things to the earth to make their crops thrive when they should have left it back in Europe.
Respect existence
Or
for
expect resistance.
indigenous liberation.
The problem with the left, and I'm not trying to judge, I just think it's a thing, and it's about practicality. Everyone is making choices all the time because it's overwhelming. I mean, you come here and you look at the book and you want to go and see this, 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 this. And what can you do? It's all opposite each other. So what happens is a lot of the animal rights people get frustrated and they get pissed off at other people. And next thing you know, you have animal rights people running around saying things like, well, if I had a choice, I'd save the animals and the hell with the people. The people are the problem. The people aren't the problem. Capitalism is the problem. The system is the problem. And when people are told that animals are more important than they are by people who they should have as allies, then what do? They don't give a crap about animals, and they think it doesn't affect them. They think, oh, well, I don't have time for that crap, and that doesn't affect me, and those people are crazy. So what happens is you have less support for animal rights and even less support for human rights, because the people who now don't care about the animal rights they don't understand that it's because of that it allows them to be denigrated and treated badly. I'm trying to get to change the world, but it's more than just about consuming dead carcasses. It's more than that. Nobody's going to listen to that. People don't care about that. Let's face it, most people that you see have been raised for generations on dead carcasses. But that's not the mainstream. We need to catch the mainstream and build a couple of berms to turn that stream a little bit towards a better way. Most of the vegans I know actually are African Americans, so that's not even the issue. It's the attitude, and I know lots of people who are fed up. Oh, I've had it with people. I care about the animals. I'd save the animals. Just like I can't. The people should all just die because they're the problem. But those are the people that the media amplifies.
Right.
So it's really important that vegan voices and animal rights voices, who are not automatically the same thing, but still should be our allies, or at least should be allies. It's really important that they start out with, this is a human rights issue and here's why. Now, how can you do that and how can you do this? But I know, like, when you see these poor people in some dilapidated urban setting trying to make money on, say, dog fighting or cockfighting, it's horrendous. And it sure, I mean, it may make you want to just go and strangle them and hang them up by their ears. But you can't fight violence with violence. You can't fight hate with hate. And you sure as hell can't stop animal abuse with any form of human abuse. You have to start with human rights and human forgiveness and education. And even the worst person could be redeemed if people weren't jumping to judgment at all times over everything. There's enough stuff to be judgmental about. But you want this to work, you have to do sometimes things that aren't in your comfort zone.
My name's Gary Shaw. I'm Jean's husband, and we have T-shirts from a musician friend of ours from the Hudson Valley, and all it says is "Compassion is the solution." And it's really the solution to all problems is to be compassionate and understanding, so that you can come to some consensus, so that you can come to not be enemies. And the powers that be are extremely good at segmenting people so that they believe that everything is an either or proposition, when it's all of the above. We have to stay united. We have to understand that people benefit from separating people, and we can't let them do that to us. The powers that be simply want to make the money on abuse of animals, because it's all about the commercial bottom line for them. So I don't think that they pay that much attention to that. But we as my wife said, we're locked into this paradigm of human superiority over all of the other species and all of the natural elements of our world, when the reality is that we all are part of one entity. We're all equal parts of the one planet we have, and we'd be much better off if we have respect for other humans and other species. And more you see scientific evidence that many species have the same sort of societal behavior that we do. Elephants mourn their dead and come back to places and pay tribute to grave sites. The whales form groups to do their hunting. We are all part of existence, and we should all understand that if you are abusive to any part of it, you're abusive to yourself.
Raise a paw, raise a fist. Let's not be speciesist. Animal rights, human rights, unite to fight for justice.
It is justice. I can't
Justice
separate
for
one
all,
from the other.
not
Justice.
justice for
all.
humans,
Justice for the earth.
all.
If you have justice for the earth, then you have justice for everything that lives on it. Humans, animals, as if there's a difference. Plants, minerals. It's all part of the living orb that is the earth. I can't separate any of it.
And it also involves extractive practices.
That's right.
And don't lose sight of respect for the earth means to stop extractive energy processes, digging deep into the earth to bring up fossil fuels, to frack, to mine uranium, and expose people to radioactivity. It's all part of respect and equality of our planet and all who live on our planet. And all is not just humans, it's All. We are a team.
Language is very important. When a person is doing bad things, you don't like that person because of the bad things they do and the bad attitudes they have, why would you call them a pig? Pigs don't do any of that. Why would you call them a snake? Snakes don't do any of that. Or a dog or anything, any other animal that one might decide is a derogatory term. How can any animal be a derogatory term for bad behavior by a human? How often do you hear people talk about criminals as, oh, those animals? I'm sorry, animals are never criminals. Humans are criminals sometimes, not animals. And sometimes one of our cats might be a criminal in the eyes of our dog. But other than that,
That's true.
but animals just do what they do, and they're not being bad and they're not being good. They're just being. And they're innocent. Pigs are smart and sweet and give me a break. Once again, that's hierarchical. So everyone has the intelligence they need as a species.
And just within the past few months, there was a nature show, an episode of Nature on PBS, talking about sea animals, and they found out, scientists found out, that dolphins actually have specific names for each other, and when they do their calls in the ocean, it's not directed, it's not just thrown out into the ocean, it's directing it to specific other dolphins.
Yeah.
We're learning more and more that what we consider human behavior is being conducted by species other than humans. When are we going to learn to respect that?
The whales could tell the difference. Whales who had been decimated, slaughtered horribly, the water bloodied by very cruel whaling practices. When other sea people came to those whales, those same whales in that same whale neighborhood, to say, no, we're here, we're your friends, and we don't want bad things. Those whales knew they were different, and they came and spoke to them, and they didn't try to knock their little boats over. They just spoke to them, and they had a picture of them, coming up out of the water and doing their whale dance, and that's just amazing from our point of view. But it's also known that pigeons, everyone loves to denigrate pigeons because, ooh, pigeons poop. Well, so do we. We destroy the world a lot more with our poop than pigeons do. But pigeons can tell the difference between one person and another from photographs. So if you show a pigeon a photograph of the person who they're familiar with and a photograph of someone who's a stranger, they'll go to the photograph of the person they know. I was actually in a pet store once, and the owner of the pet store had a cockatoo who she had adopted after the cockatoo's owner died. And the cockatoo was really angry and felt abandoned. And every time anyone walked in the store who looked like her owner, she'd bark at them, like, rah, rah, you get out, stuff like that. And one day I was in there, and this bird was just so fun to watch. And it was always out of the cage. The bird was given a cardboard box to play with. So it was very happy. Oh, I like this. So it was running in and out and poking holes in it, and then started tearing it apart. Finally, it kind of got bored with the cardboard box and started ripping it to shreds and throwing it all over the store. So the owner said, okay, that does it. You're going for timeout, and put the bird back in the cage. And the bird turned around and said, God damn it!
Hey, I'm Aph Ko, and I'm the creator of Afroism as well as Black Vegans Rock. I've decided to create some short videos to explain some of the different theories my sister Syl and I create on Afroism, just so that it's a little bit easier to digest and a bit more accessible. On our website, we're asked a lot of different questions, And one of the most common questions that we're asked is, what does animal oppression have to do with our anti-racist movements? And that's normally asked by a lot of Black people who don't necessarily get how animal rights functions into what they're experiencing every day of their lives. And keep in mind that when I answer this question, you can literally apply the framework for my answer to any marginalized group currently fighting for rights that also doesn't know how animal oppression factors into their own oppression. So the goal of this video is to briefly introduce you to a new way of thinking about animal oppression, and to introduce you to an often ignored layer of Black oppression which is steeped in the division between the human and the animal. All too often, white-centered animal rights campaigns or vegan campaigns are thought of as the only or dominant way of doing things, and I'm here to offer a new perspective. So for this specific video, I'm not going to be talking about health, diet, or food deserts, because number one, I think that conversation is pretty mainstream. A lot of people are pretty fluent in it. And number two, I think really important theoretical connections are lost when we only frame veganism in terms of our health and not intersectional oppression or intersectional liberation. Also, I think it's really easy to depoliticize veganism when it's only framed in terms of our health as well. You see, white supremacy is a really, really smart system because it's convinced us that oppressions on other bodies that look really, really different from our own have absolutely nothing to do with our own oppression. However, that's a myth. White supremacy has also told Black people that we have absolutely no reason to be dealing with animal rights, when in reality, Black people have been animal rights activists and vegans for a really, really long time. In fact, even in the 70s and the 80s, there was a Black liberation group called MOVE, and they fought for animal rights and they were actually vegan, so we do have a right to be in this conversation. In this video, I'm arguing that if we don't side with the animals as Black people, then we're siding with white supremacy, a system that essentially feeds itself off of anti-Blackness. A lot of scholars and activists like me and still argue that the term animal doesn't only just refer to squirrels, pigs, and elephants, or whatever the popular idea is of what an animal is. In fact, we argue that animal is essentially a socially constructed category that's created to objectify certain bodies so that their violations and abuses are seen as normal and justified. We've been spending a lot of time in our anti-racist movements only focusing on race and whiteness, not realizing that all of this is anchored to the human-animal divide. Okay, so what does that mean exactly, right? Let's get to it. So in 2015, a cop in San Francisco was being investigated for racism because he stated through text messages that Black people were monkeys, and he said, quote, "It's not against the law to put an animal down," in reference to killing Black people. Black people are always framed as animals to justify abuses they experience at the hands of white people. This was especially evident during historical slavery, and I use the term historical because modern day slavery is currently happening. The enslavement of African people wasn't only race-based. Slavery wouldn't even be possible if it weren't for speciesist thinking, or the idea that humans are better than animals. One way that white people justified the enslavement and brutal torture of Black people was by trying to show how Black people were actually animal and how white people were human and superior. Physicians back in the 1800s and before, they created really, really intense fictional narratives and reports that said Black people couldn't feel pain to justify horrible medical experiments, oftentimes without anesthesia. They said that Black people were lesser than white people evolutionarily, that we evolved to be less than. People even went so far to say that Black people's knees were constructed in a certain way to bend easier to white people because we were just naturally subservient. Black people were even put into zoos alongside orangutans and chimpanzees. The category of human is anchored to the fictional superiority of whiteness, and the category of animal is anchored to the fictional inferiority of anything labeled non-white. Now, the irony of all of what I'm talking about right now is that Black people today, well-intentioned Black people, actually subscribe to this line of thinking that says humans are superior and animals are inferior, which is kind of ironic given the racialized context of this division, where white people are the ideal human beings and non-white others are viewed as subhuman or animal. My proof for this is that anything labeled white or anything that comes out of white history is labeled human, classical, intelligent, beautiful, scientific, artistic, and anything that comes out of non-white culture is viewed as barbaric, exotic, ugly, animalistic. The list goes on and on and on, and we all really know this. Sill writes, quote, "When we refer to a person or a group as animalistic, we're not really saying they bear some strong resemblance to non-Homo sapiens. What we are saying is that they don't behave or look or believe properly, where what is proper is defined by Eurocentric white ideals. In other words, they deviate from whiteness, unquote. To this day, black people get really offended when they're called animals, which is kind of justified considering how animal is understood as being less than. And we don't want to be viewed as less than, who does? And this is usually the point where the conversation ends with black people and animals. We say we're offended and we don't want to go any further. We distance ourselves as much as we can from animals. I would argue that we shouldn't trust white supremacy's opinions on any other marginalized group on this planet, because chances are they have a vested interest in that group being inferior for some reason. We shouldn't trust white supremacy telling us that animals are beneath us, because guess what? This same system says that we as black people are beneath them. Why are we siding with white supremacy when it comes to what their opinions are of animals? White supremacy doesn't always manifest itself through cops hating black people, although it surely does at times. There are many other ways that whiteness is reproduced, especially in our own thinking and even in the ways we've been trained to understand an issue. Each time black people scream about how human they are, they're buying into a white logic and essentially saying, no, I'm not like an animal, I'm like you white people. And I would urge you to read Sill's latest article on Afroism that talks about the ways in which black people need to reclaim the animal. Animal is the greatest rhetorical and categorical weapon that white supremacy has. It can easily violate you just by labeling you an animal, even if you're a Homo sapien. We can't just attack expressions of white supremacy like police violence and mass incarceration. We have to attack the framework that justifies white superiority and the inferiority of everyone else, which is largely hinged upon who is human and who is animal. We can't use a hierarchy created by white supremacy and patriarchy for our own liberation. The human-animal binary has been used by systems of domination to violate any beings that fall outside of the imagined or ideal human body. So anyone who kind of falls outside of the category called human, also known as white, cis, wealthy, heterosexual man, you are one step away from being labeled an animal or a subhuman, and then experiencing violence legally. White supremacy and patriarchy has many different shapes, faces, and contours. What we might personally be experiencing won't look like the oppression another group of beings is experiencing, but that doesn't mean that they're not being oppressed by the same systems as us. This doesn't mean that we can't be specific to our own unique experiences and oppressions. It just means that we should use our experiences with white supremacy and patriarchy as a launching pad to build coalitions with other oppressed groups. Because remember, the goal of coming together isn't to highlight how we're the same or we're different. It's to dismantle the systems that oppress us all very differently.